Mold toxicity and IBS symptoms, irritable bowel syndrome. I suffered with it for a very long time too, and did not classify it as IBS for a very long time as well. I did not classify what I was experiencing with my gastrointestinal symptoms with IBS until I went to the doctor about my constipation issue, which I had from a very young age and could not get a handle on. And I was telling her about my symptoms, and that's what she diagnosed it as. I had thought that I had it in my mind, IBS more with diarrhea or just that kind of issue, and I didn't realize that that's what it was until I started researching more and found out that there was the IBS-C, which is constipation. There's the IBS-D, which is the diarrhea, and then there's also the IBS-M, which is a mix of constipation and diarrhea, just going back and forth. And that helped me to recognize what my issues were. I did recognize that eating certain foods made the issue worse than others. And when I finally identified that IBS was the problem and started researching more of the different kinds of foods that were causing it, I started putting all of these connections together. First of all, I learned about FODMAPs, which I'm not even going to try to pronounce what all of those letters stand for, but basically there are different kinds of the chemicals in food that when they break down, they can cause the colon to go spastic, and that's what starts this IBS kinds of responses. And they're fermentable sugars. They break down and then that's what causes the problem. And it usually takes a while for it to digest and for all of these things that are in foods to be absorbed. And so and that's why it's hard to pinpoint what it is, because it takes so long for the effects to take hold, like after it's gone through the digestive process. And so things like I was a foodie. I loved to cook, and everything that I cooked had garlic and onions in them. And I finally realized that these were high FODMAP items that were probably causing me a lot of issues. And I had to accept that, and I don't really cook with them anymore, which was really sad. Now, if I'm out somewhere, if I'm going to a restaurant, if I'm eating somewhere else, I try not to stress out about it, but there's no way that I could do like garlic and onions every day. Even now, I don't think that my system could handle it. It's just been so affected by this because of not knowing for so many years what was going on, which is sad. But I just, it's just, you have to accept that that's the way that it is. Let's see. Oh, yeah, during the pandemic, I was eating, I had started this whole sourdough bread thing, right? It's supposed to be this healthy bread, and I'd made my own sourdough starter and got this big old thing of flour, this good flour that I was going to use, and then recognized that after I ate it every time, I'd get the bloat and my belly would hurt. I'd stop using, I hardly ever used the bathroom anyway, but it was even worse when I had, with the constipation, it was even worse then. Just stomach pains, and so then I finally had to accept that, sourdough bread, you got it. And so I just stopped making it, which was really sad. Was eating, my boyfriend at the time, he worked at an Italian restaurant and would bring home pastas from this Italian restaurant. And of course, with the gluten and then the huge amount of garlic and stuff. Like during the pandemic, I was miserable. I also feel sure that I had the SIBO, which was the small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and along with the IBS, which were causing the IBS symptoms too. So, and you know, it's just like all these perfect storms. Like, you're doing all these terrible things all at the same time, and then like have no idea what was going on. But yeah, fatigue and anxiety, being at home, which I was exposed to the mold at home too. It was just not. I looked like I was like 9 months pregnant at that time. It was horrible, so much pain. But yeah, so the figuring out a low FODMAP diet. Now, I will say too, when you're dealing with mast cell activation and IBS symptoms, sometimes those foods do overlap that you're not supposed to eat because they're high in histamine and they're also high in FODMAPs. And some foods don't overlap. Some foods that are on the low FODMAP gave me problems, so I couldn't eat those. And some foods on the high FODMAP list were fine and are still fine with me. It's all individual. That's why the first thing that I start out with is awareness. You got to be able to pay attention and see when your body is reacting. I realized that when I was starting to react to everything, I was eating a lot of dairy. My kids, I was a family and consumer sciences teacher, so that was my job. You know, we cooked and all. And my kid, you know, I was showing them how different ways of making smoothies. I'd gotten back into, I'd started eating Greek yogurt again, which looking back was not a good idea. And then I was drinking all of their smoothies, which were made with milk. And I got so bad of reactions from that, like gastrointestinal, and I'm sure it was my MCAS and the IBS both doing double whammy on me at the time. But my gums hurt. I had it so bad. And that's when the brain fog was bad. So yeah, sometimes those things can overlap and it's hard to tell. IBS symptoms usually take longer to come because it has to go through the digestive process. MCAS symptoms will come up sooner because as soon as you do something, those mast cells are going to react very, very quickly. So that's how I could tell. And the mast cell would cause IBS symptoms, and sometimes it would and it would just cause both. And it was just really hard and confusing to tell what was going on. And so there's a lot of foods and all of that too that you sort of have to be careful with when you have both of those, in which if you have mold toxicity, or probably once your gastrointestinal and immune systems are affected by that, there's a good likelihood that both of those are going to be an issue for you. Some things that helped: going on the low FODMAP diet and paying attention to the foods that I was eating was really big. I will talk about this later too, and I know this is controversial, but I did start doing coffee enemas. I know. I looked at them for a long time because I knew that they were good too for vagus nerve, like good for initiating the parasympathetic nervous system, and that's what got me intrigued by them. But I knew too that they were good for my IBS symptoms, and I will have to say that coffee enemas were a very big help, and I will do a video on those. No, it's controversial. Would not recommend you doing that if you don't do a lot of research yourself and feel very comfortable with that. But I was desperate, especially to have some help with my constipation issues, so I just it can't hurt. I'd rather do that than take Dulcolax or some kind of suppository, and enemas, regular enemas, weren't doing anything. So that's my spill on coffee enemas for right now. Let's see. I started, first of all, the NERVA, which is an app that you can purchase, and it's to help with the stress response, because I did recognize that my issues with this got a lot worse when I was, and it causes stress, and then it caused a stress response. So it goes both way. But that's those nerves, y'all, that vagus nerve and all of those nerves, they go your enteric nervous system, it goes straight to your gut. You can't separate the two. They're so intertwined with each other. I didn't really see too much improvement with that. Guess what I had the most success with in helping my IBS symptoms was when I finally started the limbic system training. I got to the point where I could just say it in my head and just tell it to stop, 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 and it would, I mean, my belly would just stop hurting. So yeah, that one was huge. So over time, the IBS symptoms have gotten worse, but if I eat something, like I think that I took too much flaxseed the other day, which I've just given up on flaxseed. It's just too much for me. But I tried the flaxseed and I dumped too much of it in my shake, and oh yeah, it was bad. Also, I have recently found out butternut squash. If I eat too much of that, which I was, like the low FODMAP serving is like 1/3 of a cup, which I knew I was doing more than that. Regular squash does not bother me, but butternut squash, and I read, and oh yeah, it's high, above 1/3 of a cup is high in mannitol and oligosaccharides or whatever those are. And so yeah, butternut squash is a no-no. So you just have to learn what is affecting you, and it takes time to figure all of those things out. But if you need any help, I will be here. I am going to give you resources in the description so that you can learn more about what I'm talking about in this video. Sorry, it's sort of long, but it's a big one.